This or this? Decisions, decisions, decisions. Hey folks, we are back with another video, and today we are going to be talking about filling up rear shocks with nitrogen. So a subscriber asked me if I only use air pumps for shocks, and no, actually I got both systems. I could use both, right? The reason I use air pumps or just regular air in my videos, I don't expect anybody out there to actually go buy an entire nitrogen system in order to be able to fill up their shocks just to service their own shocks, right? It's really not needed. That was unexpected. It's really not needed, right? Air is more than good enough. Nitrogen has some super minor advantages, but for 99.999% of the people out there, air will do the job. Keep up with regular maintenance on your shock and you will not run into any issues with air, okay? But I will admit that a nitrogen system with FOX shocks definitely makes it a bit easier to fill up the actual shock, okay? Only because I don't have to mess around with the needle, an exposed needle, having a pump, pull out, breaking needles, so on and so forth. I'm going to go over all the components over here, but ultimately this is a safety needle that Fox sells, and it works outstandingly well. It was extremely well designed in my opinion, right? Definitely a lot safer, but still not bulletproof. I mean, things can go wrong, but they've thought about it in order to make it as safe as they possibly can, in my opinion, right? Whether there's safer systems out there, I haven't seen it. Personally, I think they should just get rid of the whole pellet system, to be honest, and just put valves in their forks or their shocks. But it is what it is, okay? So next we'll go into the components if you were to build one of these on your own. Again, not exactly cheap, but not super expensive either, all right? So let's go into the components next. Before we go into the actual components needed to build this system, a few things. One, nitrogen is non-flammable, okay? Unlike pure oxygen, we don't have to worry about nitrogen catching on fire, but that is not to say that nitrogen is totally safe as well, right? Now we breathe, literally that breath you just took just now is about 78 to 79% nitrogen in it, right? So we breathe it, but if a tank, a valve in particular, fails in any single which way or form and we have free flow in a small room, nitrogen will dominate oxygen in a very big way, extremely fast. In other words, it's going to essentially replace the oxygen in that room or lower the oxygen percentage in that room where there is a potential to suffocate, believe it or not. Okay, so you still have to be careful. Like one, it's technically okay to lie nitrogen down. I mean, some trucks basically deliver them like this. Ultimately, you shouldn't. You should have it upright. And the biggest reason to have it upright, securely upright or in a secured manner, is if it's in a lay down position like it is here, something could go wrong and I could bend something or hit all the valves over here, all the meters, and something could break, allowing for free flow, right? So you want it standing up. The reason I have it lying down right now is because it's just a lot easier to put it in frame. It's a pretty big tank. Definitely when you work with nitrogen, try and keep it in a secure upright position. Again, just be careful with it when working with it indoors or keeping it in an indoor environment, all right? As for the parts, so for starters, you're gonna need a tank, right? Nothing really special about this tank outside of the stickers that state that it is filled with nitrogen. This is a regular steel tank, just like I have scuba tanks that are about 4 times the size of this. 4 times, yeah, just about 4 times the size. I got 120, no, 3 times the size, my bad. This is a 40 liter. I got 120s for my scuba gears. So, but it's very highly pressurized, just like my scuba tanks, right? It should be about 3,000 psi. My scuba tanks technically are 3,500 psi. So now you don't need to buy this brand new, guys, right? This is where you save the most amount of money in the system. The way nitrogen works, it's like propane. You hand in a tank, they give you a tank back. They don't care what tank you hand them in, right? As long as it's a tank for oxygen, nitrogen, argon, so on and so forth, right? So if you find a used tank for like, you know, 40 bucks, 50 bucks, 60 bucks at a flea market or a marketplace or Craigslist, buy it, bring it to a gas supply shop, and they will exchange it for you. You're going to pay 30 bucks for, let's say this is a 40. You're going to pay 30 bucks for a 40, give or take. I have no idea where you live and what the costs are based on where you live. But around here, it's about 30 bucks for a tank. And that's it. You're done. You have a tank. Comes with a valve and one whole sealed system. All right. So one thing you will absolutely need, without a doubt, is a regulator. Okay. Now, this is where I would not go cheap. So there's regulators out on eBay. You can find them for like 30 bucks, 40 bucks. I'm not sold on that, right? I would go with a reputable regulator company that's been making them for a long time. Because if anything fails, that can fail. This whole mechanism can fail. And again, we do not want free flow, basically, right? We want to control that, which is another thing. When using this, you're way better off using it with a window open, door wall open, garage door open, so on and so forth, just in case, right? Just for safety purposes. But you will need a regulator. Now, with a regulator, you're going to need a hose, okay? One more thing I want to say about the regulators. So you don't want to get any old regulator. For FOX DPSs, for instance, we need to be able to get the 500 PSI, right? So as for the regulators, this measures the pressure in the tank. This regulator, or this dial here, measures the pressure coming out the hose through your needle, okay? So we want to be able to at least cover 500 PSI, right? So this one technically is good up to 1,000 PSI. Technically, I think this one's actually an 800 recommended max, but it says 1,000, right? And over here we have up to 4,000. Technically, it'll be 3,000, I believe, for this tank. And other tanks will vary, basically, right? And they make different size tanks. You could get a 20, which will cost you less, right? They make bigger ones. I mean, but if you decide to do this, you don't need to go big, plain and simple, right? A 40 is more than enough. 20 is probably more than enough if you're just going to do it on your own and not help people out with their shocks. So again, a tank, we need a regulator. The regulator needs to register at least up to 500. Typically 600 is very popular. 600 and 800 are the popular on the high, or popular limits on the high end, right? But you do not want anything below 500. The reason I say that, the majority of dials out there are below 500, between the 250 and the 400 mark, right? So you want to keep an eye on that if you're going to buy this, system, okay? So again, we have a hose, high pressure hose. You need a high pressure hose without a doubt. Now, technically, this part is optional. So, well, this part's not optional. So this is the nitrogen needle, the safety needle that FOX sells, okay? And you can, if you want, attach it straight to the hose. I don't recommend that, right? Personally, I recommend putting a valve in the middle that you have total control of, and then putting a secondary dial, okay? And I'll show you why based off how I use it. So I highly recommend, if you're going to build a system like this, tank, regulator, hose, valve, secondary dial, and obviously you're going to need the needle, okay? Now, FOX's needle is really nice. So again, it's a safety needle. It has a button here that you press in order to expose the needle, okay? You won't see that. You should never see that when filling up a shock, okay? All of it should be hidden internally. And then when you pull off the shock, as you will see later, that automatically closes, okay? Well, I just held it there, but it automatically closes in order to keep the needle non-exposed, to keep it out of sight, basically, right? You do not want to get stabbed with this needle with air coming out of it. If you do, I highly recommend you go to a hospital extremely fast, okay? That is very, very dangerous. If in some way or form you manage to get the needle poked in you while air is coming out or nitrogen is coming out, that's a very bad thing. But the way FOX designed this should not happen if you use it right, okay? So that's all the parts. The system's turned off right now. Next, we'll go into turning it on and, well, filling up a shock. Before we turn this thing on, the most important tool here is right there. Safety glasses. Do not operate this thing in any single which way or form without safety glasses, all right? You do not want to take the chance. So let me put these on. Now, we have our valve that opens up the main tank, okay? And then we have a valve here that controls our output. So this dial over here is going to tell us pressure within the tank coming out. This dial over here is going to allow us to control the air pressure coming out of the hose and ultimately coming out of the needle, okay? The way the valve works on the regulator, counterclockwise decreases pressure. Clockwise increases pressure. The slightest movement will increase pressure. This is extremely sensitive, okay? So what I like doing is starting lower than 500. So 500 is right there, that red line. I'm not sure if you can see it all that well on the camera, right? Well, you can't see 500, but there's a red line over there, right? So I like starting it lower than 500, filling up the system, and then increasing it to 500 to make sure that I hit the 500 mark. I'm dead on the 500 mark, right? So when turning open the main valve, you do not want to stand in front of the dials, just in case these things fail and they burst out, okay? So you want to stand on the side, just a safety precaution thing, all right? Never stand or never look with your face at the dials when opening up the pressure. To open up the pressure, we are turning counterclockwise on the valve, okay? I was wrong. This one's 2,000 PSI. Oh, because I've already used it. That's why. It fills up max to 3,000. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it up, right? So far we're safe. Everything's good. I'm going to turn this guy on. Now he's all the way open, right? Now I'm going to look at this dial, and I'm just below 500. I mean, just a touch below 500. So I'm going to take my dial, and I'm going to turn it clockwise, or at least my valve, and I'm going to turn it clockwise. And we're talking about millimeters, guys. It's like extremely sensitive. Okay. And there we go. We are at exactly 500 PSI. Okay. So next, we are going to set up this dial and the needle in order to be able to fill a shock, okay? And that we're gonna do in a vise. So we are on the vise. Now, this method here works for me. I'm not saying this is the best method out there, right? But I have, the way this is set up for me, I have total control, instant control over my valve. I have instant control over my safety button over here in order for the needle to get engaged, okay? And I see my gauge at the same time. So I could do an emergency shut off. I could just let go, activate, deactivate as quick as possible, okay? So this works for me. I'm not saying this is the best setup out there, but so far, so good. Knock on wood, I haven't had any issues with this kind of setup, okay? It's on a vise, and everything is solid. Now, the FOX needle has a safety guard at the end, and we are absolutely going to need this little FOX tool, right, that goes into the bleed screw, okay, or the set screw, whatever you want to call that screw that holds the pellet in place. And ultimately, we have to install it. Now, to install it, we have to remove this safety cap, okay, so this red safety cap. And then there's a threaded side over here. Watch your fingers when you put it in. We're going to take this guy and we are going to thread him in. Just like that. Okay, so now the needle's going to go through this little tool over here, and ultimately it will provide perfect depth as far as penetrating the pellet and putting air inside the system, and everything will be hidden basically. That's the nice thing about the way FOX designed this needle, okay? As for the screw on the shock, right, the bleed screw, the way I do it, and again, this is me, right? What works for me. Take a 5/32 Allen and I screw it in basically tight. Okay, so that's tight. And then I back it out by about 1/8 of a turn. Okay, give or take a little bit less than 1/8 to 1/8 max. Okay, to start off with. So this guy should be set. Now we have air on this side. We do not have air coming through on this side yet. Okay, so next step is to insert the needle in the shock and the pellet. Okay, now this is why I sort of like this setup. The way I have it, I mean, I set it up where everything faces me, right? I depress this button and basically we try and get the casing all the way to the back. If it doesn't, I got to loosen up just a little bit until it goes in a little bit more. There we go. See the way it goes all the way to the back? Now the needle is inside the shock. Now I'm going to tighten it up just a little bit, okay? So just a little bit. This is a lot by feel. I don't want to leave it loose. I want to tighten it up just a bit, okay? So now I'm going to turn on the system and I'm going to wait till it goes to 500 PSI, okay? Now you're always putting pressure inside. Do not let go of pressure on this hand. You are always putting pressure inside until we are completely done, and then we pull out, which is going to be a good jerk when we pull out, okay? So I'm going to turn this up, and again, don't look with your face at the gauge. Stay away from the gauge. There we go. So this is fully open. This particular valve is closed here and closed straight up here. When it's in line, it's fully open, right? So I am at 500 PSI on the nose. So now I'm going to close it. I'm going to wait a little bit just to make sure that it doesn't go down, and it is not. It is staying at 500 PSI, okay? Now this might be a little bit tight. This is where it gets a little bit tricky. We want this tight, but not too tight where we can't pull it out completely, right? So all we do now is we are gonna give it a good jerk outwards that way. Not this way, not that way, straight out, okay? And you're gonna hear a pop, and that pop is just pressure releasing from the inside, okay? So 1, 2, 3. There we go. And then we're going to take our screw here and tighten them down completely. And we just filled up our shock with nitrogen. That air you heard escape was just the air coming out of the system from here out. This guy, he's blocked off by the valve. Now that we're done, we have an option where we can remove this tool from the tip of the needle. Now the reason I do it is because, again, I'll do I'll do air fills with this tool using a hand pump, right, and the adapter for the needle. But if you do remove this tool, you don't leave it in there permanently. Always put back the cap, okay, in order to make sure that needle's not exposed. So just take this guy and put him in. There we go, and just screw him in. All right, and from this point forward, it's just a question of disconnecting everything and storing it away before we can say we are fully done. Now, for me, I don't like leaving the entire system pressurized when I'm complete with using this thing, right? I close the main valve, okay? To close the main valve, it is counterclockwise, and I mean the main valve on the tank. I'm not going to bring out the tank over here to show you, but you saw how it opens. Just counterclockwise to completely close it. But then, when it's completely closed, there's still nitrogen in the system. What I like doing is taking the system outside and opening up the valve and releasing all the nitrogen outside as opposed to releasing it in the room that I'm in, breathing the air that I'm breathing, okay? That's just a safety precaution thing. If you're in a very large space, like super large space, you really don't have to worry about it, but I'm not in a super large space, guys. It's actually a pretty tight compartment in here. So, so I just take it outside. I got a door wall right next to me. I just open up the door wall and just point it outside and boom, just release this valve and the rest of the hose, the rest of the line and the system will empty out, okay? So I recommend you do that too. Don't leave this thing fully charged, stored. You just never know. Close the main valve, all right? And that was it. Again, it's actually a lot simpler doing it with a nitrogen system than it is doing it with a hand pump. There's no questions asked. The hand pump's a bit of a pain in the butt. You got to be careful with the needle, right? The needle on the hand pump, I mean, I've had one go through this finger completely by mistake without even realizing it effortlessly. So with this guy, again, Fox made him where he's definitely, I don't want to say totally safe, but they really thought about this design. I got to give the guys credit over there, right? Whether they did it or not, I have no idea, but I got to give whoever put this system together credit as far as trying to make it as simple as possible. Again, in just about all cases, this needle is enclosed, right? The only reason I don't have this here permanently is because I use this guy if I do a air fill, basically, with a hand pump, I should say, okay? And that is pretty much how you use a nitrogen system to pump air into FOX shocks. Do I wish Fox put valves in here? Yes, I do. I really hope one day they figure out how to put a valve in here. In every single which way or form, that would be a lot easier, because then I could just put a regular Schrader tip on this thing, nitrogen or air, and not have to worry about needles, right? And not have to worry about pellets. So, okay, guys, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you dislike the video, please just scream at your laptop saying this video sucks. If you subscribe for more videos, click the bell, bing, 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 in order to get notifications when new videos come out. All right, so until the next video, which will be coming out soon, I hope everybody all is well with everyone, and we will be talking to you soon. Have a good one. Bye.